Hi, I'm Dave Atkinson, and welcome to Life on the Straight. For this great adventure series, I'll be reading from my 3-volume book, The Yonder Years. I chose not to publish it, but there are links on my channel that will take you to a cloud drive where you can freely download the PDF files. The videos in this series will be providing a little more content than what is in the book. We're now in the third section titled Stuck in a Holding Pattern. If you've been following along, we need to stay in roughly the Pacific Northwest region of the country until at least November, when one of our problem tenants is due to vacate their space in a little business park that we own in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Before we head off to more distant parts of the country, we will first have to find a replacement tenant. And that's okay, because even though Amy and I were born and raised around Seattle, there is much of the Pacific Northwest that we had yet to experience. As this episode begins, September is now upon us, and we depart Idaho for Central Oregon, where we will reside until the 14th. For us, it was an unexpected surprise, with so much to see and do, all while staying at a great Thousand Trails RV park. Thank you for following Life on the Straight. If you enjoy this content, please subscribe to this channel, which is free, and like and share as well. And now, the Yonder Years. We decided not to hook up the Honda to G2 as we exited the park, being that it was a very busy highway and I had to make a sharp angled turn to our right as I pulled out into traffic. A little further down the road was a gas station where we topped off G2's tank and hooked up the Toad. The 284-mile journey to Boardman, our favorite RV park to date, had begun. In Coeur d'Alene, I pulled off the highway and Amy ran to a nearby Starbucks and picked us up some breakfast to go. We caught Interstate 90 westbound to Ritzville and then headed south on US 395 to Pasco, where we merged into Interstate 82 to cross over the Columbia River. And Interstate 82 soon met up with Interstate 84, which took us to the doorstep of the RV park. This would be a short-term stay as we would be leaving on the 5th towards Sunriver, Oregon, which is just south of Bend. In the meantime, we had a day in this area to do some exploring, so we decided to check out the huge Columbia Crest Winery over the river in Patterson, Washington. We bought a case of assorted wine and then headed north and then west into a little town of Prosser. The route we took was a 2-lane road through some farmland that made its way up a ridge. At the top of the ridge was Horse Heaven Vista, which looked some 800 feet down upon Prosser and a valley, bisected by Interstate I-82 that stretched west towards Yakima. Prosser is the home of Chukar Cherries, which is a family-owned business that sells sauces, salsa, candies, and of course, cherries of all types and coatings. After some generous taste testing, we bought a significant number of goodies for our travels and then headed back to Boardman. It was amazing just how many miles we were racking up with a Honda. This little jaunt was 140 miles, but fortunately, it was in a vehicle that averaged close to 30 miles per gallon. Had we taken off on our adventure in a trailer or fifth wheel, where our running around vehicle would have been a heavy-duty truck, our fuel bills would have been significantly higher. Finding a decent RV resort to stay at was an interesting process. As I mentioned earlier, Thousand Trails resorts were not up to a level that I had expected after taking my sister's advice to sign up with them. Our big adventure was one of those things in life that meant more to me than it did to Amy, and since she was being such a good sport about it, a much better sport now that we were traveling in G2, it became my goal to map out our travels to places that had really nice RV parks to stay in, or to at least find the best park in a given area. As customers of Camping World, we were also Good Sam members, and I used their recommendations in finding suitable campgrounds. Back when we were first using Good Sam, they offered no way for members to add their own comments to a park. All one had to go on was a Good Sam rating that Good Sam assigned, and sometimes that rating missed the mark. A positive Good Sam rating was why we chose to stay at the Blue Lake RV Resort, but our experience was far worse than the glowing Good Sam rating. Because of that, I began researching other outlets for RV park reviews. There were Google reviews, but all I read were free-flowing comments. I wanted something more structured, kind of like Good Sam, that would also give me the statistics of a given resort, such as total number of spaces, the types of hookups that were available, whether they offered Wi-Fi or cable TV, etc. I finally found a website called RV Campground Reviews, and it's now renamed RV Life Campgrounds. I added my own review for the Blue Lake RV Resort, as well as for the Boardman Marina Park that we were now at, and the Thousand Trails Resort near Newport, Washington. As our adventure played out, I found that reviews at this website better reflected actual conditions than did Good Sam reviews. I should point out that Good Sam later opened up the reviews to include customer comments, so that really helped things out on that platform. Because I had benefited from reading reviews, I also wanted to give back to the RV community. I ended up posting my own reviews of campgrounds on the RV Campground Reviews website throughout our travels. Even today, they continue to send me periodic emails about how many others have looked at my reviews. I posted a total of 57 reviews, and as of a while ago, 6,037 RVers have viewed them. Pay it forward, as they say. After filling up both vehicles' gas tanks, we departed on a 211-mile trip to Sunriver, Oregon. Interstate 84 west, and then US 97 south to the resort. A simple trip plan. It was a bit of a climb, about 1,000 feet up from the Columbia River to the high desert plateau of Central Oregon. And G2, with a full tank of gas and pulling the Toad also with a full tank of gas, wasn't too happy about it. She made it though, and we enjoyed the scenery, which was mostly large fields of grain tucked in throughout the barren hills. Amy made me laugh at one point along the drive. We were in a steep descent, and there was one of those emergency truck exits into deep gravel should the brakes fail. There was an out of order sign hanging at the beginning of that exit. Amy said something along the lines of, "Hey, I'm speeding down the hill with no brakes and there's this out of order sign on the emergency exit, so yeah, I guess I'll just drive past it and continue to speed out of control. What a stupid sign." Yep. I wish we had gotten a photo of it to join our collection of other stupid signs that we saw throughout our adventure. When we checked in at the Bend Sunriver RV Campground, we wanted to find a site with 50 amp power, but if memory serves, they were mostly 30 amp campsites. Once again, being a Thousand Trails campground, the office didn't assign us a campsite. We had to go out and find one and then report back to the office where we were at. I think that we drove around the large 317 site resort searching for a 50 amp site, but eventually settled on a 30 amp one. And just so you know, the power pedestals for 50 amp and 30 amp look different due to the nature of the plug receptacle. It was a wonderful site though, all nestled within tall evergreen trees with plenty of privacy, relatively speaking, since it was a campground. Like the 1,000 trails we stayed at next to Newport, there was no sewer hookup, so we went back to doing dishes in a plastic tub and tossing out the water into a shrub nearby. This campground was the third 1,000 trails we had stayed at to date, and it was the best one yet. It had huge lawn areas for playing frisbee golf, or landing a plane, I'm kidding, and a little western-style village up on a boardwalk surrounding the office area, including a country store with video rentals. They had basketball and pickleball courts, a pretty pathetic mini golf course, a large swimming pool, horseshoe pits, and the like. The campground had bathrooms and showers throughout, and 2 sewer dump sites, plus you could fill up your rig's propane tank. Rabbits were running around the country village, and jumbo squirrels were running through the trees. In short, we loved this area, and it would be our home for 9 days. There was a little building where we could work on puzzles or check out books, and I could actually get a good Wi-Fi signal from there, although I couldn't get it from our campsite. So it became my go-to place for updating our software and downloading our email. After getting all set up, we drove south about 10 miles to a wonderful Mexican restaurant in the town of La Pine called Los Tres Caballos. It was a tiny little place, but it received very favorable reviews from a number of websites, and it really lived up to them. The food was wonderful. If we ever find our way back to that neck of the woods, we will definitely return if they're still there. The next day was a big day of shopping, including going through the ringer once again with Walmart and having them provide Amy's prescriptions. It was always a 2-step process. You either tried to call them, and if you were lucky enough to get through and speak to a pharmacist, they would take Amy's information down and attempt to contact whichever previous Walmart store she used to fill her prescription order to transfer it to this store. Then they would say to come in after a few hours to pick them up. If she couldn't speak with the pharmacist, then it meant 2 trips to Walmart. A pain to be sure, but a necessary one. While shopping, we bought some additional bedding for G2's hide-a-bed, as we had been in contact with a friend who was going to ride to Portland on the Amtrak train and join us at our next site for 2 camping locations for separate. Let me rephrase that. She is going to ride to Portland on the Amtrak train and join us at our next 2 camping locations for several days. On September 7th, we headed out to Mount Bachelor, which lies about 22 miles west of Bend. It is a ski resort built on a volcano. Mount Bachelor is more of a destination ski resort than a local hangout, but it lacks the lodging, rentals and homes, and villages that we saw at Big Sky and Schweitzer. We rode a chairlift to the Pine Martin Lodge, a large structure probably halfway to the summit. In the summer, they featured a challenging disc golf course that took the players back down the mountain. We were not disc golf players, so after some vending machine snacks at the lodge, the restaurants were closed, we chose to hike back to the base. A very different hike than the one we did at Schweitzer Mountain. Here, the soil was pretty much volcanic pumice, and it was challenging to walk on as it never really compacted like soil. You get on a steep part and would immediately start slipping and sliding, and if you reached down to catch yourself, the pumice would cut your hand. The more we descended, the better the trails became, with more actual dirt to walk on. From the top, the views of nearby Broken Top, North Sister, and South Sister Mountains were spectacular. 2 days later, we decided to trek to the John Day Fossil Beds National Monument Painted Hills Unit. This was to be a 212-mile round trip on US 26 through the town of Prineville, a little city known as the headquarters of the Les Schwab Tire Center chain, as well as hosting huge data centers for Apple and Facebook. The drive from US 26 back to the Painted Hills was scenic in its own right, with lush irrigated fields on the valley floor leading you back to the visitor center. The Painted Hills are amazing to behold, band upon band of pastel colors. For the best views, we hiked the Carroll Rim Trail 3/4 of a mile up an adjacent mountain to a viewpoint at the summit. The trail started out about 3 feet wide but narrowed down to just a footpath in the grass as we approached the top. Signs were everywhere to be on the lookout for rattlesnakes, so we were watching where we were stepping as we were just in our shorts and tennis shoes. On the way back to the campsite, we stopped at a Starbucks in Prineville and got a good chuckle. Parked outside was a pickup truck labeled Sheriff, Crook County. Job security, no doubt. After hanging around the campground for the next day, except for a little shopping, we drove north to Bend on the 11th to check it out. When we were at the Capitol building in Boise, we had gone to the 10 Barrel Brewing Company brew pub for lunch, and they had another one here in Bend, so we decided to grab some lunch there. Lunch was good, but our subsequent walk was better. The Deschutes River flows directly through Bend, and it must get dammed up around the downtown area to create Mirror Pond. Drake Park lies between downtown and the pond. Not only is the park beautiful, but the Drake Park Neighborhood Historic District butts right up against the park. We walked for block after block, taking in the historic homes, many with plaques telling you the history of the houses. The Bend area is big on beer, and we passed a beer bus on the street. There were 5 people per side facing each other with a table between them, all pedaling away, not sure who was steering, as they traveled throughout town to the different taverns and brew pubs. That would be an interesting ride the longer one was on it. The next day was a short drive to the Lava Lands Visitor Center, part of the Newberry National Volcanic Monument. It features a lava cone with a road that spirals around to the top, where there was a lookout tower overlooking probably hundreds of square miles of lava flows. There are so many trees in Central Oregon, but here you just saw a sea of cooled lava butting up against the border where the lava ended and the trees began. Branching out from the visitor center were paved trails that took you through the lava. We walked the Trail of Molten Lava, which was fascinating and heavily populated with chipmunks. In fact, the ground almost moved outside the visitor center with the little rascals. As we prepared to depart the Thousand Trails Resort on the 14th, our first order of business was to drain the black and gray water holding tanks. There was a line of motorhomes waiting for their turn, so I got out and mingled with the other drivers who were milling around. The rig behind me was a big diesel pusher with a guy at least 20 years my senior driving it. He told me that he and his wife hit the road as full-timers way back in 1978 and that they were now on their 7th motorhome. Holy smokes, that's 36 years of being on the road. By comparison, we were approaching 4 months.